Simply Financial with Certified Financial Planner Christopher Calandra is an innovative, comprehensive, informative, and cutting-edge podcast that discusses financial topics ranging from personal finance, economics, politics, and personal growth. Simply Financial will cover intriguing and thought-provoking questions so that the listener can simply increase their financial IQ.
Welcome to episode number 8 of the Simply Financial podcast. I'm your host, Christopher Calandra. Thanks for joining me for today's episode. On today's series with Everyday Americans, I am lucky to be joined with Joseph Eddy, or Joe Eddy, who I've known for some 17 years. He is a retired small business owner, an architect, and an entrepreneur who sold his business at the very end of 2015. He's retired and has moved to a different state. So over the last couple of years, he's had a very high level of change, and I'm really lucky, like I said, to have him join me today for this episode. So thanks for being here.
Well, thank you, Chris. It's my pleasure.
So how has all of this change been? Again, you sold your business, you retired, and you moved from Connecticut to Florida. How has all this change been?
The change has been exciting. It's that new chapter people talk about, and for us, for my wife and I, it's just been phenomenal. We've enjoyed the change. As tiring as it is, it seems like I'm still getting up every day, almost running a business, just moderating the changes. But it's great, and we feel a little bit like we're in paradise.
Yeah, I look to you, how it's happened for you and Maureen. It's inspirational is not the right word, but it's enjoyable to see how you worked so hard for so long and sacrificed so much to get to the point that you spend so much time thinking about and having it be happy and fulfilling. But I wanted to ask you, and we haven't even talked about this off, not camera, but off mic, is you built this business over a long time. I've built my business. I'm self-employed. I'm entrepreneurial, so we share that. But was it weird selling your business, a.k.a. your baby? This is a business that you worked on for a long time. You were associated with the business as the primary architect, so it's something that was probably close to your self-image. Plus, you and Maureen, your wife, worked on it day in and day out. So was it weird to sell it and let it go?
Not exactly weird, honestly. When I established the business more than 30 years ago, we were 30 years formally established as a professional services business. When I established the business 30 years ago, I specifically selected a name that would ensure me when I got older and was ready to do something else, it was a marketable name and not directly attached to me as a personality in the sense that most professional service firms are. It was more marketable to have a more generic term and name. So even when I established the business, I had in the front of my mind the idea that life changes and I would be ready to make that change. And although it kind of was my baby, it's fun to turn the page. It's fun to do something different. And this was always part of my plan.
So you had the foresight some 30 years ago when naming your business not to have it be the Joe Eddy firm or the Eddy and Associates firm. So that seems very wise. And I could see somebody in their late 40s, 50s, or 60s having that awareness. But you were much younger than that. So where did that come from? Did you learn that in school, a class? Did you get some advice from a mentor? Or are you just that smart?
I'm not really. I could be. I'm just that stupid. But no, I never. No one ever mentioned it. But I do remember. I worked for some very large firms, and I remembered how problematic it was in the late 70s and early 80s when firms, professional firms, had established themselves and were at the edge of exploding in size. And the senior partnership wanting to get out had anchored itself with its own names. Okay. And it was a true anchor. Because now you would go to a meeting as a senior architect or lead project And you couldn't present the weight of the firm because the weight of the firm was held down by, frankly, this old guy who retired.
Okay.
And right then I realized, oh my God, we all make mistakes like that. And that's what sort of turned that around for me.
Very good. So with the sale of the business, you had a little bit of a transition because in the early days after the sale of the business and you sold the business to an employee, this was kind of a prearranged business deal that was in the works for a while. You had some responsibility through the transition, but I think that's kind of in the rearview mirror, right?
Yes.
So you've transitioned, and Maureen has transitioned to this retirement lifestyle. How has that adjustment been from a hard-working, self-employed, entrepreneurial guy to being retired?
We have yet to establish a rhythm. How's that? I mean, it's been 2 years, but I've yet to get like a rhythm together yet. It's almost 2 years, but it'll come. I'm not panicked about it. And by the rhythm, I mean, I'm a get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, go to the gym, go to work, get done, come back, do some more work at the house that's related to other things, or do some recreational things. But I was fairly organized in that format. So now that I'm retired, without that, oh yeah, I got to go do this, and I should be at the office at 7 or whatever. That's gone. But in retirement so far, because of the sale of properties and because of the sale of the business and because of transactions, I've yet to quite build that rhythm, but I'm not panicked in any way about it.
So would you say you're still, after 2 years, in kind of a transition mode and haven't gotten into the new normal of what retirement will look like because of
absolutely
responsibilities to the old firm, moving, property transfers, all of that stuff? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Have there been any surprises, things that you wouldn't have anticipated about being retired versus being a working guy?
Yeah, I did not anticipate the amount of travel. I mean, we planned on traveling when we retired, but I didn't anticipate the volume of travel that we've had without being necessarily like what you would call recreational travel. Like, I'm not going out to Alaska on a cruise. I'm going like 5 times to see my son in San Diego for one reason or the other, and my daughter-in-law, and now our new grandchild. Or I'm going to Colorado to see my other son, or it's these kinds of things which I didn't anticipate, but it's all great, but didn't anticipate that. That's the only thing that's really weird.
Very good. Now, you mentioned, and I think I mentioned at the beginning of the recording, is that you lived in Connecticut a very long time, raised your family here, built the business here, were very involved in your community, philanthropically, business-wise, and when your kids were young, you coached and all of that stuff. But very soon after selling the business and getting to the very edge of entering into retirement, you decided to buy in the state of Florida, and you didn't own there beforehand, and you've moved and you've changed your residency to Florida. Can you walk us through why you did that? Because for those of you that are in Connecticut, it is very, very trendy, if you will. It's very popular for people to retire and leave the state of Connecticut. Most rankings show that Connecticut is at the bottom or near the bottom of the list for places to retire. And the demographics in Connecticut show that lots of people are leaving the state of Connecticut, and the number one destination is Florida, and you kind of fit the profile. So could you walk us through how you and Maureen decided to move to Florida, to buy in Florida, and to leave a state that I assume you have a fondness for?
I like Connecticut a great deal, but the decision to move to Florida involved a lot of little things. First off, we've been going to Florida for years with friends, and we always had a great time. It's a little bit, we're in southern Florida, it's paradise, And you do get a hurricane once in a while, so what? It's just a chance to rebuild or remodel. But the idea of moving to Florida made so much economic sense to me, it was illogical to retire in Connecticut at the time, and I think it still is right now. I can look at our income stream and the tax on it, even though we're retired, it's so impractical to be a Connecticut resident in this tax environment we have now. There are just too many things that made it painful. The attitude of the entire state, still not even able to establish a budget at this point, tells you how desperate it is. Mm-hmm. So, and originally Maureen and I are from Western New York. We have great numbers of friends here in Western New York. We still have friends in Florida, and so the move was not a critical issue. We were happy with that.
Yeah, I use, and not to flatter you too much, but I use you as an example a lot when I'm doing media or speaking in front of groups or with clients and prospects, because to me, the worrying part of Connecticut is in part the economics, but I think it's absolutely... Connecticut should be ashamed that a good citizen like you, small business owner who accumulated some wealth, was a good taxpayer, was a good citizen throughout his lifetime, immediately when they retire, seems to be in a hurry to pack up, and leave the state. That's a problem economically, right? Because we're missing your tax revenue, but it's also a problem for the community, for the society of Connecticut, because we're losing really, really good people that are part of the great fabric of Connecticut. And I worry that if we lose too many people like you, it's not just an economic problem, but it's also a community social problem. And you're an example of who we don't want to lose. You're who we want to retain.
It is a social problem. And that's exactly how I kind of look at it. And there was the financial end of it, no question about it. But the social side of it is just as big an issue. If you look at Connecticut, and I'll never forget a couple years ago, one of our brilliant legislators here in Connecticut decided that they should impose a special tax on Connecticut retirees who've left the state because they unfairly took the money with them and aren't getting taxed on it by Connecticut state income tax. Well, I'm also a state retiree. I taught in the evening for almost 30 years at a local college. And all I could think of was, this is the attitude of my legislature.
That's right.
They don't care about what good I brought to the state, or that, I tried to be on various charity committees, and I'm friends with hundreds of them, but that they thought it was important to somehow chase away at me or anyone like me for that little bit of money told me it was time to go, man. Yeah. That's the social issue.
No, you're right, and it's that attitude that is problematic. Like, we want to punish people for leaving as opposed to studying why they're leaving and try and have policies in place to retain that talent and money. But I think it's wrong-headed. I'll throw out, and I could go on a riff about this for probably hours, but I just saw the statistic that since Connecticut imposed the state income tax in 1987 by Governor Weicker, Connecticut has had the lowest economic growth of any state over that period. So we are a state that has been in decline a long time. We could pick on Governor Malloy, who I am not a fan of, but this has been a long-standing problem in Connecticut. You mentioned something, and I alluded to it also. Another area, not to give you a very big head, that I admire you and Maureen is because you have been very giving, very philanthropic, involved in the community. You've donated, I don't know the details, but I think a decent sum of money over the years. But you also donate your time, including a lot of donation of professional services as an architecture, so that when various charities have some type of architectural need, you would step in and donate. So where does that come from? Why did you do it? Where does that come from? Is that how you were raised? Was it to advance your business? Can you walk us through a little bit about that?
Well, it really didn't have anything to do with my business or advancing my business. I think it's important to be a good citizen. I think it's important to give to your community. And the best